Good morning, I'm Diane Smith, and welcome to Capitol Report Morning Update for Monday, May 16th. Glad you could be with us. Here's the latest from the state capitol today. A concessions deal has been reached between the Malloy administration and the state employee unions to achieve $1.6 billion of the $2 billion in concessions written into the new state budget signed into law almost 2 weeks ago. Governor Malloy said the final $400 million will be realized with additional spending cuts and existing revenue. Details of the agreement are being withheld officially until the unions notify their rank-and-file members first. But the governor did have this to say on Friday.
We have reached an agreement with our fellow state employee leaders that will, over the next 20 years, save Connecticut taxpayers a total of $21.5 billion. This is the most significant agreement with state employees in Connecticut history, not just because it solves a short-term problem, but because it produces the kind of long-term structural reform we Connecticut residents, elected leaders, and our state's workforce so desperately need if we are to again grow, produce new jobs, and prosper together. Our agreement is also historic because of the way we achieved it. We respected the collective bargaining process, and we respected each other, negotiating in good faith, without fireworks, without anger. To my friends in CBAC, thank you. You have stepped up to the plate and said you want to be part of the solution. Under this agreement, we will all share in the sacrifices necessary to stabilize our state's finances.
And here to talk about how they were able to reach this agreement that the governor called historic is Mark Ojakian, who is the Deputy Secretary of OPM and the Chief Negotiator for the administration, and Matt O'Connor, a spokesman for the unions. First, I guess congratulations are in order, although I don't know if you really congratulate people, but at least it must be a relief to have this deal reached. But, Mark, this is not the end by a long shot.
Well, it's the beginning of the end, I think. It was a very long process, and now the process moves from the negotiating phase to the ratification phase, and we have some shortfall to make up in the budget, which we intend to start working on immediately, and to be as helpful as we can to CBAC in getting that agreement ratified.
Because, Matt, there's quite a bit that has to be done now. The rank and file's just starting to be informed today about the details. What's the process toward informing them and getting ratification votes going?
Well, Diane, it is a complex process in large part because the Coalition of State Workers Unions is so large. We represent approximately 45,000 full-time equivalent state public service workers in every agency in the executive and judicial branches. 15 unions, 34 bargaining units, and that's just a term of art that refers to the number of contracts that cover those workers. Getting information out to VOC rehab technicians who work up in Putnam and to conservation analysts who work down in New Haven, and making sure that we get all of the details to the membership, or at least make a good faith effort to get all of the details to the members of our unions is the first step. And that effort was begun over the weekend, continues today, and will begin very soon to start to schedule what will become the ratification votes, which are done in a multi-part process. So it does get very complex. It does get very intricate going forward, and it's a process that takes a number of weeks.
Mr. Secretary, previous governors have won concessions from the unions that your former boss, when you were working for the former state comptroller, Nancy Wyman, was critical of at times because she said they yielded short-term savings, but they cost the state money in the long run, things like early retirement incentive plans. So clearly that was not what you were looking for this time. What was the approach at the table then? What were you looking for?
Diane, the governor was very clear about the direction he wanted to move forward with. He was no borrowing for this budget, no early retirement incentive programs. He wanted real structural reform that would yield savings in the out years, and no early retirement incentive programs. Those have proven over time not to save any money. Previous governors have delayed funding the pension fund and have touted that as savings and concessions when it really is not. So Governor Malloy was very clear about the direction, and I think we were able to move in that right direction. We have real structural reform. We have no gimmicks, and I'm very proud of the work that the two parties were able to do to get this agreement.
Now, I know that both of you have vowed not to reveal any details, but as we were talking before the show, some of what we've been reading in the media apparently is not correct. There have been some things talked about, such as, well, I guess I can't be that specific about it, really, except that people have said no layoffs for 4 years. They've talked about certain wage freezes. Not necessarily true.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say whether some of that is true or not true. What I've been amazed at is that there have been inaccuracies reported in the press, and I think that does a disservice to everybody. It gets the members, I think, unnecessarily riled up because they don't know, they haven't heard from their leadership, and I don't think it helps the process move forward. So we will be in a position very shortly, I assume, to be able to release those details and to talk in more depth about some of the changes that were made, not only on the concession side, but also on the savings side that the state employees recommended during this process.
Matt, there's been some discussion, and of course the governor has called, since the day he presented his budget, for shared sacrifice. Are the employees going to feel some pain from this?
Well, sure. I think that you ask any worker, whether it's a state public service worker, whether it's a machinist at Pratt & Whitney, if it's painful to have to give up what has either been negotiated or worked for, and they'll tell you that's a real sacrifice. And you know, the members of our unions coming to the governor's town hall forums, for example, over the 2-month period that he traveled all over Connecticut talking about his proposal, said over and over again, we understand the degree and the nature of the crisis that we're in. We understand we have to step up and be part of the solution. We can't be the only ones. We need to look around and use this opportunity with a new governor, a new direction, a new vision that Governor Malloy brings to Connecticut to start to fix some of the broken economic policies that got us in this mess in the first place and led us to a point where we have a $3+ billion budget deficit, and we have 9% unemployment, and we have working families, middle-class families, struggling to make ends meet right now. And that really comes down to shared sacrifice that includes the corporations, that includes the ultra-rich here in Connecticut, who frankly hadn't been asked to step up and be part of the solution in past economic crises, certainly hadn't been asked to step up and support economic vitality when the economy was moving, when we were in much better shape earlier in the decade. So this is really an opportunity to start to turn that around here in Connecticut.
Mr. Secretary, will there be an effort to downsize the workforce in terms of other employees, maybe ones who are not unionized, the managers that the governor's talked about quite a bit, or to downsize the workforce through attrition, not filling positions? I guess what I'm asking is, you know, a year or two from now, will we have fewer employees working for the state than we have now?
I think over the next few years you'll see a much different state organization. You'll see the agencies looking very different. The governor is very committed to downsizing government, but especially at the upper levels. During the campaign, the governor spoke very often about there being too many layers of management between the frontline workers and the commissioner level. I think he's committed to making those changes, to streamlining the operations, to flattening the organization. So I think through attrition and through some management changes, you'll see a much leaner, more effective state government.
All along, we've been talking about $2 billion in concessions. This package would give $1.6 billion in concessions. Where do you go for the rest of that money?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do, the governor has been very clear about not wanting to increase the amount of taxes that the legislature passed in their budget. So we're going to be looking at making some more programmatic cuts. So he's already charged Secretary Barnes and myself and the rest of the OPM staff to begin that process, to go back to the legislature with a plan by the end of the month to close that gap.
Matt, can you sell this to the unions? Can you sell this package?
I think one way that we will be able to is if we can go back to the members of our unions and talk about the bigger picture that they're part of. Obviously, they are being asked to contribute a significant amount. I mean, you just said it. It's $1.6 billion over 2 years. And I should point out, as the Secretary did, that a tremendous amount really comes from cost savings that are produced through finding greater efficiencies, reducing redundancies, looking at the top-heavy structural organization that is state government today, and making some fundamental changes to that. But if we can talk about ways in which the members of our unions have supported that opportunity to start to bring in others and have them share in the sacrifice. For example, if there's a $400 million shortfall to fill, one way in which at least $100 million of that could be filled is by passing the combined reporting legislation that would close corporate tax loopholes that for too long have let multi-state and multinational corporations avoid paying taxes right here in Connecticut. That'd be one way the governor could do it without raising new taxes. He's simply asking corporations that are profiting without pitching in here in Connecticut to simply start to participate in the economic vitality of the state, something that they really ought to be doing anyway.
I'll let you have the final word. Is that something that the governor would consider?
I think the governor is looking at a variety of options, but I think he was very clear about the tax base and the tax proposals. I know that the combined reporting and the throwback rule and a lot of other corporate tax structures were considered. As a matter of fact, the governor proposed one, and the legislature rejected it. So I think I think at this point the governor is going to be looking at areas that he can continue to cut. Those areas that are not that wouldn't be as harmful to the state, and I think you'll see that proposal by the end of the month.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary Mark Ojakian, of course, Deputy Secretary of OPM Matt O'Connor, a spokesperson for the unions. Thank you both for being with us, and we'll continue our discussion. But we wanted to show you a little something that the governor also had to say on Friday. He reiterated, as we just discussed, his focus on downsizing state government.